Okay, let's start that again. Well, first we need to smile. That'll end up being a thumbnail at some point. So, welcome back, everyone. This is I'm in a Car, episode number 31 with Mr. Rainer Mueller. I'm actually very happy I had to redo this cut because I ran out of space, and originally I got your name wrong, which is crazy because I've known you for like 3 years.
That'll never happen again.
No. But I'll probably be like, is it Rainer or Rainer? What did he say last time? Anyway, I'll just watch the video and we'll begin.
Sure.
Yeah, so had the opportunity of knowing you for, I'd probably say 3 years.
Yes.
Maybe a bit more. Through the Canadian Franchise Association, Intrigue was and kind of still is a franchise, technically, like legally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And we were set up with mentor-mentee relationships, and then through that got to know each other pretty well, and then asked you to be part of our board of advisors, and you've been doing that for probably the better part of 2 years now.
Yes.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob. Great to be here.
Awesome.
And you're a heck of a driver so far.
Oh, this is good. No head shaking. Oh my God, why are we doing this? So yeah, we usually start the show off with a little bit of a quick summary, like
Sure.
who are you, where are
Sure.
you coming from, what are you up to these days?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Southern Ontario. I think I hold those ethics and morals as a business ecosystem close to my heart. I think a lot of us do business in a similar manner, and I grew up that way. I'm a child of immigrants who came here after the war. And I was reminded what life was like in Europe after the war. And so I'm very grateful to what this country's given us. And I try to live that example by way of collaborating in business and sharing what I can in other charitable and philanthropic pursuits. And it's part of my life.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So when we met, you were CEO Williams Fresh Cafe?
I was. So that was kind of one of my last stops in the franchise world, per se. I cut my teeth mainly at M&M Meat Shops.
Right.
I think that's where I'm most well known. I spent almost 20 years there, helping grow that business from 19 stores to over 500.
One of which is just over there.
We're just passing the one in Guelph Speedville, built that in 1990.
Awesome.
It was one of my first stores, yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So I learned a lot about franchising and started out on the store construction design side and moved eventually into franchise recruitment and transferring stores and strategy. I learned a lot about strategic planning. I still hold that concept very dear to my heart. I think it's critical for companies to have a strong plan for them to forge a way forward. There's so many distractions in business today that I think having a clear strategy that the management team and your entire team, follows is super critical to the success of a company.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It was interesting. Just recently, we've formalized our vision of what we want to accomplish over the next 20 years. Mm-hmm. And as much as it's like this big, huge goal, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When I presented it to people kind of one-on-one, there was like this really neat theme of feedback around, oh, well, if we're going to go do that, this needs to get fixed ASAP. And it was neat how having a common goal and a common plan for the future really focused people's thinking on what needed attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as much as we can say, strategic planning makes you think about the things you want to do, what it also forces you to do, and one of the most important assets that I see of planning is the idea that you're going to jettison activities that you used to be dragged down by, or they just occupied too much of your critical productivity.
Right.
And resources, and it allows you to align resources, and people love to be led. I mean, this is an interesting segue into conversation about leadership, but people love to be led, and sometimes it's not by necessarily a person on a podium, it's by this idea. And
right.
I think today's greatest companies are led by ideas more than people.
And even Jim Collins does a really cool job in Good to Great about talking the levels of leadership. And
Sure.
there's a lot of level 4 leaders in the world that he refers to that are like charismatic and like stereotypical,
Right.
the way you would define what a good leader looks like.
Sure.
But then when they leave the organization dips
Right.
and fails
Right.
or doesn't do well, where level 5 leaders kind of sit a bit more behind the scenes, a bit more fanatically disciplined, a bit more humble, and they focus on the idea of the company. And then
mm-hmm.
when they leave, it doesn't really have any impact
mm-hmm.
on the progress of the company. So that's really neat that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think that what was drilled into our collective psyche as managers at M&M, going through that planning process was that a shareholder or a CEO could actually vacate for a few months, and the team should continue to work toward the objectives that they've identified.
Right.
And the CEO or the shareholders only need to come back and check periodically on how you're doing on identifiable metrics like, customer count, or pick whatever's important to you, maybe
right.
6 or 7 of them. And so the team's really driven by that higher, lofty ambition rather than, what's been dictated to them. I think, if individuals, managers can run their business more like small businesses in their departments or whatever, breakdown you've got within the company's better off. And that was a great lesson I learned at M&M.
That's cool.
I was able to do that.
So then you moved to Williams Fresh Cafe?
Yes.
And what kind of made that transition happen?
Well, it's interesting. I'd say that for a long time, the stars were aligned that my personal ambitions were in line with the company's, and it was very much like, geez, I don't know if I was really working there or whether I was taking the weekend off. It got so entwined into my life that it was really magical, and I'll say that with all honesty. But what does happen with everybody is that you do evolve to the point where you want to stretch your legs, you want to go prove yourself in different territories or different sector or different responsibilities, and not every company can ever accommodate an individual's ambition.
Right.
It's virtually impossible. I was lucky enough that for a good part of 20 years, my work in that company was more or less parallel, but I think at some point individuals and companies kind of diverge, and I think that's more commonplace today for sure than it was 20 or 30 years ago, where people just assumed you're going to work for the same company,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. So when the time came, I was in search of, first of all, more responsibility. I think it's natural.
Sure.
You want to do that, and I wanted to test myself. Geez, did everything I believe in, could I apply this in another environment?
Or was it just this crazy special place?
Or was this crazy, weird, one-off thing that I just happened to fall into? So I spent a couple years at Cora Breakfast and Lunch,
okay,
and helped them grow mainly in Western Canada.
Yeah.
So we opened up a bunch of restaurants for them in a higher role as VP. And then I moved over to Williams and was recruited over there, more or less to, I guess, take what I knew in my experiences and help a company that had struggled a bit and try to make it better. And so I was in the middle of a 5-year plan there and eventually becoming CEO, and sold the company about a year and a half ago. So that was at the beginning of 2016 we sold the company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is huge and amazing.
Yeah,
it's
a big thing.
Gave you the opportunity to just sit back and say, well, what do I want to go do? Which we'll get to.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's really healthy. I mean, in my mid-50s, I had a chance to get off the bus and look around, and somewhat bewildered time off. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, especially for a guy that's likes to get his hands
and I'm
dirty.
used to a lot of hours and busy and activity, and for that to happen was as much as we planned for it, it was still a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah.
And made me really think about my goals. And hey, guess what? I started to do strategic planning for my own life, and I think that's important for everybody. As much as we can talk about this as a business concept,
yeah,
bring those same ideas and apply them to your personal life.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because in the last one I was doing, or last week anyway, we were talking about this idea that your calendar really symbolizes your priorities. And my calendar for a long time of my career was all work, and there was nothing else in it. But now my calendar is jammed, and I have to put family time at home, kids time, bike rides,
Sure.
stuff like that planned out. And it sounds crazy, and I'm not saying that you have to live every minute of your life planned, but there's buckets of time in my life for budgeting, for goal setting, for family vision planning, and just taking exactly what you said, taking those business ideas that create a high-functioning organization in business and bringing it into my hopefully high-functioning organization I call my family, because it's still an organization of people.
Absolutely. Who look for a leader. Leaders.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if the audience knows, we are in very similar situations in terms of the way our families were built. Let's use this parallel. So I had 3 kids within a couple of years myself. So I started out with a daughter and ended up with 2 twin boys.
Right.
You're in a very similar situation.
Yeah, I started with a boy and I got 2 twin girls.
Yeah, and I tell you, I was not as strategic when I was your age. I was very much, I just put my head down. I just did what I had to do. I was getting up at 4 a.m. to do the change, when the boys were 4 or 6 months old. And you just got through it. You put your head down. You're in your early 30s.
Oh, God bless you, buddy.
10, 15 years later, you poke your head out and say, what happened here? They're going to high school and university.
What the fuck is happening?
And I got to write a big check, or a number of big checks. So, God bless you for being strategic about that, because I wasn't.
That's great.
And now they're in their late 20s, and one just turned 30, and I can tell you that the benefit of time really makes it a lot more enjoyable. At this point in my life, I can tell you, as I said to you last time, there's a few new wrinkles that I've seen on your face, but that comes with the territory. I'm sorry, my friend.
No, it's all good.
Your kids are going to be modeling their parents' behavior.
Yeah. Big time.
As you know, it's less about what you say, and the same principles apply in your family as they are in a business structure. They're looking at how you handle things, and they're going to emulate you one way or the other. Yeah. So say all the best psychologists.
It's the truth. Oh man, it's so funny. I'm not sure if you've met her, but there's this wonderful woman named Susan Nash, and she runs a little place called Body Innovations in town. And she's a mom of, I want to say 2, maybe 3 kids. No, 2 kids. Anyway, she told me about this little exercise that when they were like 8 to 10 years old, every once in a while they would rotate their seats at dinner and act as if they're the person in the seat they're sitting.
Come on.
So the kids would end up being the parents, and the parents end up being the kids, and then everybody during that dinner would act as if they were the person in the seat. Wow. And you got a really cool insight in terms of how your kid perceives you.
Wow.
Which I put in my calendar for, the year 2024 to start doing this.
That's really good.
Anyway.
That's really good. Well, I think one of the things that, if you can get a group, let's just kind of go back for a minute and talk about strat planning. The way I went through it, you're encouraged to think like the CEO, like even as any manager of maybe a tangent sector of the business, you're encouraged to think like the CEO. That's an incredible amount of freedom that I'm sure those kids really enjoyed at that time. They were trying to express in different ways, who their parents were and how they think they should behave.
Yeah, big time.
It's amazing training.
Yeah,
I really like that idea.
So do I. That's why I put it in my calendar.
2024.
Yeah, literally. So coming back to this idea around what you're saying about how, leadership is kind of a bit more about what you do, not as much as what you say, and, how we're, as people, we want to be led, but we also want to go about things in our own way. Guy Kawasaki wrote a really cool book called Enchantment, and he talks about this idea of map for people if you want to enchant somebody, and one of them is giving the opportunity to master a skill or talent. And the second one is giving them autonomy of task, autonomy of team, and autonomy of time. And then the third one is purpose. In the world of franchising, it's legally defined in a way that says this is how we go do business. Mm-hmm. You're going to buy the process that we run. Mm-hmm. That's the value of your purchase. Mm-hmm. And then they ought to go run the system. Mm-hmm. When we joined franchising, I was under this very rational assumption that when somebody invested tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars into a business system, that it would make logical sense for them to embrace the system they just purchased. It'd be kind of like me buying the Subaru and just ripping out the engine and then hoping it still worked. But because I don't do that, I just bought the car and I'm really happy with how it drives because it gave me the key, I put it in, and I use the stick shift. I do all the things the operator's manual tells me to do. Sure. But when it comes to people running a business, I learned that logical assumption was wrong. Yeah. And it was flawed. So I'm just curious, how did you manage a group of franchisees that kind of innately, based on human nature, don't really want to be told what to do, but through the business system of franchising, need to run the system.
Yeah, and hence the conundrum that is franchising.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why, first of all, I think your management skills have to be extremely well tuned in working with franchisees, because they come at it from a variety of perspectives. Some are looking for the security and they will do virtually anything that you tell them to do. And those sometimes don't always make the greatest franchisees. Others will be fighting you the whole way, and they got into a franchise system because maybe they lied to themselves.
Right.
Ultimately, which is kind of tragic because it created a lot of stress for them after the fact. But the conundrum really is, I think you have to be an excellent communicator. You have to remind franchisees why they got into the system. You have to make them part of the system. And that's very difficult to do if the purpose isn't clear, or you haven't communicated that purpose to the franchisees, or really involve them in more than just a token way.
Right.
It's not going to work. And I think franchising has tried to catch up in the last 20 years with a lot of other companies that have been able to identify clear vision as to who they are. You know, could you imagine Starbucks, for example, trying to roll out as a franchise system? I mean, they're very regimented. That experience is what it is.
Yeah, very much so.
You know, although there are, I ought to say, there are Starbucks franchisees that are the hotels that they rest in,
right?
For example. But more or less, you know, you look at the better, well-recognized brands or business models of the last 20 years, and many of them aren't franchise models anymore. Right. So I think it speaks to the crisis that franchising finds itself in some respects. Some of the well-proven models, such as Tim Hortons or McDonald's, you know, they're now entering into some struggles where franchisees their profitability is slipping because there's new corporate shareholders who probably haven't sold their new purpose, I should say, to those franchisees. And so it's getting into the mainstream media where they're having some struggles.
Yeah, and I've heard about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So then in your experience, what did you do to focus on, you know, bringing purpose to life or getting people engaged in what it is the company was doing?
Well, I have to say that I had limited success in that area, mainly because I took over a system that was, you know, 3/4 of the way through its evolution.
Right.
So I did have a lot of franchisees that just weren't happy, period.
Right.
And so I think you do your best to accommodate them, but I think you really invest your energy into finding ways that you can part company. And it sounds drastic, but the truth is, you know, if a relationship's not going to work, why prolong it? And
you don't want to stay together just for the kids.
No, you don't want to stay together just for the kids.
Toxic.
And you know, in some ways, I saw it as a valuable contribution to their quality of life, because they were constantly in this aggressive, combative situation with us that didn't really justify either of us participating in it. Like it just didn't go on and on. I think with the with the cooperative franchisees, we got a lot done. You know, we improved profitability. We got them more engaged. We had to rewrite some governance items, but I think, you know, those are part of a longer term process. I think what I've learned more than anything is that it's difficult picking up a business, you know, at a significant part in its evolution, like somewhat further down the road, and pretend like you could turn it around. Right. It really, you need that purpose from the beginning. You need that management style, that attitude, that feeling like you're part of a voyage together,
right? Rather
than indoctrinating people later on.
Right.
Those people probably shouldn't have been on the bus in the beginning. So you kind of have to face facts sometimes.
And part ways.
That's okay.
Well, and I mean, it's really interesting you bring it up because, one thing is if someone's in a defensive or combative mindset day in, day out, that can't be good for their home life. That can't be good for their personal life. Like, there's nothing healthy about that mindset.
No.
So trying to figure a way to part ways as amicably as possible,
sure,
obviously is going to be kind of freeing for those people and the system that you're part of. But the thing that kind of rang true with me is I hear a lot of people who say things like, I could run that business better.
Sure.
I could take that business somewhere.
Sure.
As if they have some grandiose ideas and techniques that people don't understand, or they maybe discount the ability of the current management to run the company. But I think it's always I think people jump a bit too quick to that idea. And I think things are green's always grass on the other side, right?
Right, and it's really easy to be critical of decisions that you don't like.
Yeah.
And
don't make.
And don't make. And so, it's a heck of a question and a real challenge. But I still see the future of franchising as a bright one. There's so many opportunities now, especially with service-based businesses, home-based activities that really, if you have the right foundation and the right core business model, you'll be able to execute amazing things.
Yep.
For a lot of people, and I'm really kind of questioning whether there's a future for storefront franchisees. I just think real estate and the idea that a landlord gets such a portion of revenue, I don't know that model works anymore.
Right.
I just don't think the economy is so rigid that works for a lot of systems anymore.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then one last piece.
Yes.
Words of wisdom you live by. If there was something you could go back, 25, 35 years and tell a younger you, what would it be?
Well, I would say focus on a purpose, because that really coalesces your group around where the team is going. Pay attention to strategic planning. It's critical. It'll keep your team on track.
Is there anybody around the idea of purpose that you've found helpful to try to bring that to life?
Sure. I mean, I'm a reasonably big fan of Simon Sinek.
Oh my God, you're like number 8 out of 30 that have referenced him.
Yeah. So
it's a good stuff. If you haven't read his stuff, read his stuff.
It's good stuff, and I think that's healthy for everybody, whether it's part of your business life or whether your personal life.
Yeah.
You should wake up every morning and try to think of why am I really doing this? And I think that's extremely healthy. I would say that as I get to my advanced age, I still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
There's a few more chapters to write. There's a few more businesses I want to tackle. And there's a lot of gas in my tank.
Right.
And so I'm very excited about the next 20 years. We live in very interesting times.
So what's your purpose-ish? Why do you get up and do what you do?
Well, it's easy to say, but I think I'm drawn to helping people. I really like this idea of being collaborative and helping people that sometimes need a way through the weeds. Mm-hmm. And I've done very well by that personal business model. I've succeeded in business, and I have this strong network of very close friends who I know dearly, and they form the foundation of my life.
Awesome.
And I've been very fortunate.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Robert, my pleasure.
All right.
It was a lot easier than I thought it was.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryder. All right. See you guys. Bye.